Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to turn your road bike into a gravel bike. If you've been following along for a little while, you've probably heard me talking about gravel bikes becoming quite a trend in the cycling industry. I reckon there's a good reason for that. They're actually really cool. What a gravel bike is a road bike with the drop down sort of handlebars that has the mountain bike tires on it. So you're able to take it off-road onto these gravel tracks. That kind of just makes it a little bit more versatile. That's why I think gravel bikes are becoming so popular. Now it's worth noting here as well that gravel bikes are a little bit different to road bikes. I know that I just said that the drop handlebars with the mountain bike tires, that's a small aspect of it, but I suppose gravel bikes might also have room for more frame mounts, stiffer frame, different geometry. There can sometimes be a little bit of a difference with it, but in today's video, we're going to talk about how to convert your road bike into a gravel bike. So while this process won't completely change your bike, it'll be able to make it feel a little bit more like a gravel bike before you have to go and actually buy one. So you just heard me say that gravel bikes are like road bikes with big, thick mountain bike sort of tires. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to replace the tires on this bike. So there's actually two different ways that we can replace the tires on this bike. We can do it the cheap way, or we can do it the more efficient way. We're going to talk about both of them in today's video. To quickly explain the first way that we can do this, we can replace just the tires. At the moment on a road bike, the tires look a little bit like this. They're a relatively slick, sort of thin material, but we can move across to putting these bigger gravel tires on there. They've got these little knobs along the side. Maybe the tires are a little bit thicker. They might even be actually wider as well. So you've got more sort of surface area on the ground. That is going to be the cheapest way that we can do it, by just replacing the tire and maybe the tube inside it as well. Some of the pros and cons that I can quickly think of here is that one of the pros is that it's nice and cheap. Just buying tires, you can get tires for maybe $100 each, give or take. But the downside is that if you did want to put the road bike tires back onto it, so you wanted to go for a road ride with your friends, you've got to replace the tires again. Replacing the tires is not a quick 10-second task. It's not the end of the world, but it's not a 10-second task. This is why it's the cheap way, not the easy way. So doing this is something that you would only want to do if you were going to use this purely as a gravel bike from now on, because putting the road bike tires back onto it means you have to do the whole task all over again. And the other option that we've got here is that we can buy a second wheel set that has gravel bike tires on it. You can leave your road bike tires on one wheel set and your gravel bike tires on another wheel set. This is what makes it so quick and easy. You can just simply replace the wheels at the snap of a fingers in your shed before you go out on a bike ride. That's what makes this a lot easier. Some of the downsides here though, is that there's a few more parts that you're gonna need to buy. So it will be a little bit more expensive. Obviously you have to buy a new wheel set. Could be $500, could be $1,000. It might be a bit of a costly exercise, but you'll also need some other parts as well. When we look at the wheel here, there's a few different parts going on. We've got the tire, we've got the brake rotor, and we've also got the cassette. So you'll need to buy those parts as well. So yes, this is a much quicker and easier way to do it, but it's going to cost a little bit more money. This is a really common thing that I see here in my bike shop. People come into the bike shop and say, Lewis, I want to buy a road bike, but I also want to go for a mountain bike ride with my kids on the weekend, or go up into the hills off-road with my friends on the weekend, or something like that. So they don't know which bike they want to buy. Do they want a road bike or do they want a mountain bike? That's exactly where the two wheel sets come into play, because now they can make it feel like they've got both bikes. So now that you know about both options, let's talk about how to actually do it. So first thing that we want to do here before we actually start the process is we want to have a look at how much tire clearance we've actually got. This is a really important step because some bikes can fit the larger tires and some bikes cannot fit the larger tires. So let's have a closer look at how we know if it's actually going to fit. The first thing we're going to talk about here is what type of bike you actually have. So this goes back to the old rim brake versus disc brake. These rim brake bikes tend not to have quite as much tire clearance as what these disc brake ones do. So on a rim brake one, if I'm being pretty blunt with it, you're probably not going to fit a tire much bigger than what you've already got. Whereas on a disc brake, we should have lots of different options here. So when we're looking at this rim brake bike here, I can sort of see that it's got 25mm tires on it. And if I'm looking down at the areas where the tire goes through the frame, to be honest, it's probably not much room to go much larger than a 25. We might be able to squeeze a 28mm, but probably not much larger than that. Most gravel tires start at a 30 or a 32mm and go up from there. So if I'm being pretty frank, I don't think the gravel bike tires are going to fit onto this rim brake bike. So you need to have a look at your bike back at home and see if it's going to be compatible. One of the clear indicators here is disc brake versus rim brake. But as you can see on the disc brake bike, this one actually has quite a bit more room and it already has 32mm tires. So you'll be able to fit pretty much any gravel tire on here without any issues. The next thing we need to talk about is choosing the correct tire. Now, the correct tire for me is not necessarily the correct tire for you. It's going to depend on what your goals are. If you want a more in-depth video about different types of tire, we're happy to do one. So let us know in the comment section below. But the long and short of it is work out what your goals are and find an appropriate tire for those goals. With that being said though, the overarching theme with the gravel bike tire is that they will have a bit more tread than what a racing road tire would. They're a little bit more knobbly, a bit like, you know, mud tires on a four-wheel drive or a mountain bike, I suppose. So they will look different to a road bike, but there's different types within that even. But one of the most important things here is to make sure that you get the correct width of tire. Most of the time when we upgrade to gravel bike tires, we probably want to go a little bit wider. That's a pretty fair thing to do, but sometimes there's a limit as to how wide we can go. So as we were earlier in the video, we can look at the tire clearance, see how much room there is between the tire and the frame. But to go one step further, we can even jump on Google and Google what bike you've got and see if you can find the tire clearance that they talk about as well. You can study that like fire. It's important that you don't go too wide for the tire because you don't want it to rub on the frame and that might lock up the wheel, or it might damage the frame, or it might even damage the tire. So we want to avoid going too wide. So now that we've worked out what tires we want and how we're going to fit them, now it's time to actually do it. We've done a few videos further back on our YouTube channel about how to replace a tube, and in those videos we talk about how to replace a tire as well. So if you want a more in-depth video about how to actually do this specific task, we'll have them in our videos further back there as well. So now we're ready to actually start doing it. Let's put this tire onto our wheel. So this step really is as straightforward as it sounds. We're going to put our new tire onto either our old wheel or onto our new wheel, and then put that in the bike, and that's all that we need to do. As you would have just seen, the importance of finding the right tire is kind of #1 priority. I thought that I'd be able to fit this tire, and I am a relatively competent bike mechanic, and it just was not going. So make sure that you get the right tire, because we were able to make this one fit pretty easily. So the right tire is quite important. Now that we've got our tire fitted, it's time to inflate it. When we're talking about inflating a gravel bike tire, it might be a little bit different to a road bike tire because we're probably a slightly higher volume, slightly lower pressure, as opposed to a racing road bike that's the opposite. It's higher pressure, lower volume. So now we might go to a bit of a lower pressure. My recommendation here would be check out with the manufacturer of tire and see what the recommended settings that they've got is, but I'd say it's probably somewhere between like maybe 60 and 80 PSI if it's a skinny tire like this, but if it's a big fat tire, it might be less than that again. So I can't give you the answer here, I'm sorry. That's about how I'd write it actually. I'd be happy with that. There you go. And now it's round as it should be. So now let's get the new wheel into the bike. Cool, and there we go, wheel installed. And now we can test the gearing and the brakes. And obviously it doesn't actually work because we haven't done the next steps yet, which are to fit the cassette, and we're not even gonna be able to stop the wheel because there's no brake rotor to stop it as well. That's why doing it this way, replacing the wheel and the tire, is a little bit more difficult and a little bit more expensive. Because now we've got to talk about finding a compatible cassette, probably the same one that we've already got, and a compatible brake rotor. So now that you've got your new tires on there, and perhaps even your new wheels, depending on which pathway you took, now technically you've got a gravel bike. But there's a few other things that we can do that we can change to make it feel a little bit better, but these aren't necessities. These are just little upgrades that we can do to sort of make the experience a little bit better. Let's talk about them. Some of you might have already noticed that when I put this new wheel in, I haven't actually put in a cassette. So we've got no drive, we can't even go anywhere. I've done that on purpose because I wanted to say that now that we're putting a different wheel on there, we can also put a different cassette on there. We can go a little cassette or we can go a big cassette. A big cassette's gonna make it easier to go up the steep hills when you're going slowly, so there's pros and cons both ways. Something I'm just gonna mention here though is if this is your second wheel set and you still wanna use your other road bike wheel set, the size of the cassette that you've got should hopefully be pretty damn close, if not identical to what you've already got. My reason for saying that is if you were to have this on there on the road bike wheel, and then you put the other wheels on there and they've got this on here, the derailleur's not gonna suit it very well. So yes, you might be able to make it work, but you're gonna have to make quite a few changes to make it work. So in the theme of keeping it easy, I would put on the exact same cassette that you had on your road bike wheels. However, if this is gonna be your only wheel set, this could be a really good opportunity to go to a slightly larger cassette. Or you could go to a slightly larger cassette on both of your wheel sets. If you want a more in-depth video all about different types of gearing, we've actually got one coming out in just a few weeks, so subscribe along and you'll see that pop up soon enough. Staying in this sort of wheel area, we can talk about upgrading to tubeless. Tubeless is a really common upgrade for gravel bikes and mountain bikes and quite a few road cyclists as well, but probably more gravel bikes and mountain bikes. Tubeless means that instead of having a tube, we are now tubeless. So there is no tube inside there. We've got some sealant, some goo that's sloshing around inside the tire. And if we were to get a puncture that fell back out, a nail or a thorn or something like that, hopefully the sealant can plug up the hole from the inside while you're pedaling. So it's pretty much like saying that you can't get a flat tire unless something was to go catastrophically wrong. So on a gravel bike, as we're riding in these off-road trails and there's sticks and stones and all this sort of stuff, flat tires are unfortunately part of the game. So tubeless is going to give you your best way of getting around that. Staying on the topic of tubeless, we've actually done a video much further back in our YouTube channel. I think it was one of our earliest videos when we first started this channel. So be polite, we were still learning, but you might be able to learn a couple of things from there. But if you want us to redo that video and you think it wasn't very good because we were in our learning phase, let us know politely in the comment section below. We'll be happy to redo that video as well, all about how to set up a tubeless wheel. If we work our way across to the contact points of the bike, the parts that you're actually touching with your body, your hands, your feet, or your bum, we can change some of those parts as well. Let's talk about the handlebar tape first. Now that we're riding on these bumpy off-road tracks that are shaking our hands around and vibrating our whole body, some people like to go to a slightly thicker handlebar tape or wrap a second layer on top of what you've already got. That's gonna add some cushioning on your hands, take a bit of the brunt force off of, your wrists and maybe your elbows and maybe even up to your shoulders as well. So thicker handlebar tape or double wrapping your handlebar tape is a pretty common upgrade that some people consider as well. If we work our way to another contact point, being our bum, we can look at different saddles or even a different seat post. I don't think this one's necessarily something that you have to do, but if you wanted to go to a slightly thicker saddle, now that we're on these bumpy off-roads, this might be a good opportunity to do that. And then if we work our way down to the other contact point, being our feet, we can look at pedals. If we're on a road bike, we probably have road bike pedals, whereas now that we're trying to convert it to a gravel bike, since we're going to be off-road, sometimes we're going to have to get to difficult sections of trail where we might have to dismount off the bike and walk along. If you have road bike cleats and you've tried to walk along gravel, you already know how difficult this is, but if you haven't done that, just take my advice that it is very difficult and you'll scratch up your $500 carbon fiber shoes. So you might want to move across to some gravel bike shoes or mountain bike shoes. I group those two together because they'll have a slightly different cleat. So you're able to walk along these difficult sections of trail or through some clay or lift your bike over a fence and then climb over yourself or whatever it is you need to do. They're just a much more versatile shoe. So if we're moving it from a road bike to a gravel bike, it's a really good opportunity to upgrade our pedals. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we've done a video further back on our YouTube channel about different types of pedals, but I'll quickly mention it here as well. Road bikes look like this, mountain bikes and gravel bikes look like this. If I turn them on the side, you can see how this yellow cleat sticks out so much from the bottom of the shoe, and it's just such a solid material. Whereas these mountain bike ones, you can't even see the cleat from there unless I turn it so you can see it like that. That means that when you're walking around, you're gonna have more grip on the floor. So if it was a gravel bike, you might find these mountain bike ones a little bit more compatible. The next thing that we could do when we're upgrading to a gravel bike is putting on some frame protection. When we're riding in these off-road areas, there's going to be some gravel, some rocks that are going to flick up off the tyres, and they might even bump into or scratch your frame. There's a couple of common areas that I'd sort of think of that might have some stone chips on them. Things like the down tube, because as this wheel's spinning, it could flick rocks up so that they hit the down tube. And even around the back here as well, they might even spin and scratch along on the sides there or on the back of the seat tube. So you might just want to put a little bit of frame protection there. Frame protection is just a fancy way of saying a big sticker, by the way. So it's nothing all that fancy, but there are brands that make proper frame protection and they'll be a little bit thicker than just a sticker that you put on the fridge. I think I'm talking to the people that like to wash their bike after every single bike ride here. If you want your bike to look immaculate always, this is where frame protection can help. And the final thing I want to mention is the handlebars. This one might be a little bit over the top for some people, but let me just explain what I mean here. The handlebars that you've got at the moment kind of look like this. The edge is relatively squared. It's just nice and comfortable. You've got your lever up here, the drops down here. It feels the same as it normally does. Some gravel bikes come across to this type here, which has a slightly more flared out part on the side. That will mean that as you're riding along, if you're up in the hoods up here, it feels normal, just like it would on any bike. But then as you come down here into the drops, it's gonna push your elbows out to the side more, which is gonna give you more control and just make it sort of easier to ride the bike, I suppose. Make you feel safer when you're going over these bumps off-road. So some flared out handlebars might be a nice little upgrade. But if you were to put these flared handlebars onto your road bike, that's kind of you confirming that you want it to be a gravel bike now. It's not really gonna feel exactly like a road bike anymore. So this is a pretty big thing to change in my opinion. A quick disclaimer that I just want to mention here later in the video is that manufacturers of these big brands like S-Works and that kind of thing, they've spent millions of dollars on research and development into making these gravel bikes. So if you do want a gravel bike, buy a gravel bike. But this video is more about how to kind of blur the lines between the two. Because if you look at just a photo of the two of them next to each other, they kind of do look a little bit similar, and they kind of are. So there's things you can do to make a road bike feel like a gravel bike. But if you're going to be out there doing black diamonds and doing jumps and really like giving it hell, you're probably going to need to go a proper gravel bike rather than converting your road bike into a gravel bike. But this could be a really good entry point before having to buy a new bike. With that being said, upgrading parts on your bike, as we've spoken about in today's video, can also just be really fun. It kind of makes the bike uniquely yours. And that's one of the things that we love about cycling, that you can learn how to change things on your own bike, upgrade things, fix things. I mean, it's your bike at the end of the day, so make it your bike. I've had lots of fun making this video actually. If you reckon there's anything that I've missed in this video, or maybe you've made a gravel bike and you learned some things while you were making it, let us know in the comment section below, because I love hearing all those different stories as well. So yeah, let us know if there's anything that I should have done or that I should have mentioned in this video as well, because there's lots of people that watch this video and then check out the comment section to find out a little bit more information. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching and we'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.